Hey Pisces, and welcome to your basically bi-weekly reading. We are doing a new moon to full moon reading. So for that phase of the month where we are building and creating and waxing. And we are doing a little bit differently this particular reading. Normally these readings are about like 5 to 8 minutes long. However, we have some really notable astrology happening during this phase from new to full moon. And I think it's really important that we address that and get a few extra cards, a couple extra cards than we normally pull for this type of video so that we can get that extra support and information. I just thought it would be helpful. So this is a collective reading for Pisces sun or rising signs. Pisces sun or rising. So we are pulling from the shadow deck as well. And we're also going to be pulling some spiritual advice. I'm just going to get all of the cards pulled for you, and then we can go into it in more depth. So it's these long decks, you guys. These long decks are a little harder for my hands. My hands are pretty long, but yeah. So Pisces, what do we have going on for you? What can we be focused on with regard to your building waxing phase? What is there to pay attention to? Okay. And we're going to also get some spiritual advice. What deck am I feeling? I'm feeling this is the one that I felt first. I'm going with all the long decks. It's very, very long. So spiritual advice for that shadow card that we have up there for my Pisces. Okay. All right, this is interesting. And spiritual advice that we have coming through for this new moon phase of building. Interesting. Okay, cool. I say that a lot. Interesting. 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 Okay. All right, you guys. So let's get into it. So as we have been doing, I am sticking with using this particular deck so that because this is a collective reading, and people have found it helpful to have something that is a theme that we're connecting it back to, like either a place in their life, like work, family, friends, whatever, or a theme that is connected to the cards that we can continue to like anchor it back into. And people have said that that's helpful, so we're going to stay with that. So this particular reading, what we're having as the theme that we're coming back to is Gemini. I find it really interesting because one of the astrological transits that I'm going to talk about for a couple of minutes in just a second here is the Mercury retrograde that's happening on the 21st. And so Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So I find it interesting that your card is Gemini. So Gemini, definitely, I think you probably know some about it if you're familiar with astrology, even a little bit, right? It's that twin energy. It's the ability to be able to perceive many different facets, many different sides of a situation, of a conversation, of like perspectives, right? It's also like androgynous and kind of like smack dab in the middle there. It's about communication and writing and curiosity, right? Geminis are very like playful and social and curious and, need a lot of stimulation. Like they want things to be changed up, like, all right, we were at this, party, now let's head to the after party, or like whatever it is, like whatever example you can think of, right? But they're definitely very kind of like bzz, 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 right? Cross-pollinating, I think, is actually a really great term for this, for the Gemini. So Gemini can also be, the messenger and of like really listening and hearing those messages for yourself internally. I think that gets skipped over quite a bit too when it comes to the Geminis. So that's what we're going to be anchoring the reading back into and talking about during this particular reading, right? So with that, I've pulled a shadow deck card, which is, you probably know if you've been watching any of my videos, that I don't normally pull those for the new moon readings. However, because this is significant time, we're moving into eclipse season, this new moon is coupled with the solar eclipse. So we have on April 19th, the new moon solar eclipse happening at 9:13 p.m. Pacific time, so adjust for your time zone. And that is happening in the sign of Aries for tropical astrology and for sidereal. So when, like, typically, if you don't know about what that means, I won't go into a lot of it. What I will say is that normally if one sign is in, if a planet is in one sign for tropical, it's usually in another sign for, like one sign behind for the sidereal, right? Or I'm sorry, one sign difference for the sidereal. So with that said, them being both in the same sign, both in Aries, I feel like when that happens during a significant transit like an eclipse, right? A new moon solar eclipse, that to me is a really purified and pointed kind of space for that energy. It feels to me more aligned, more congruent, more pure. And what are we talking about with Aries? We are talking about that burst of energy, right? In tropical astrology, it is the beginning of spring. It is that burst forth. It is cardinal. It is combustive, right? That's the kind of energy that we have with Aries, very fiery, very like energetic, right? And so this particular solar eclipse new moon is going to be activating something for us. Everyone is going to have this happening in a different place in their chart, right? So wherever Aries is in your chart, you can look to see like what house that is and like what themes, what place in your life this is going to be activated in. If you're not really familiar with how to do that and you are curious about looking at that, I'm going to be putting out a reel on Instagram, and I think I'll just keep it pinned on my page so that whenever people see this, you can go back and take a look at it during eclipse season and see how you can take a look at like what is being activated in your chart, like what are the themes you're working with, right? Likewise, I'll be doing that in the same video for how you can see where Mars is going to be playing its role in your chart, right? So speaking of which, we have then a couple of days later on April 21st at 1:35 a.m., we have the Mercury going retrograde in Taurus in tropical astrology and in Aries in sidereal. So if you follow sidereal, man, that's a lot of fire. So either which way, that's what we have going on. So that's the astrology, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about it. I know that these aren't astrology videos, but I feel like it's significant. And when there's significant astrology, I like to bring at least a little bit of that into these readings. So why am I pulling a shadow deck card with regard to the eclipse? When we have the light of, the sun being eclipsed like this, it casts shadows down. Shadow card, right? What happens above happens below. You've probably heard that before, as above, so below. And so there's this reflection of like these kind of shadowy spaces within us that can bubble to the surface internally, that we can feel more prominently, depending on, again, like what we're working with, what's happening for us in our chart, but also it can happen internally, but it can also be mirrored externally. We can be experiencing things in our world that have these kind of shadowy things show up or be activated in some way. So shadows can be activated as well as really like beautiful gifts, right? So both can be activated. And so that's why I wanted to bring in the shadow deck, is because not only that, but we have this particular new moon and solar eclipse that is happening that is square to Pluto. So there is a square to Pluto, and Pluto is also about like going deep into the depths of the psyche, right? It's about a lot of things, right? Transformation, power, taboo, like, all of these different kinds of themes. And also it is about the things that feel maybe more intense or grotesque that we tend to not want to look at, and we push away or sweep under the rug or push back into the dark recesses of our mind in the corner. And so with that, we all have, it's important, I think, for us to know that we all have shadows. Even if you've been like adamantly working with your shadow aspects and integrating them and doing this work for years, even if that's what you do, there's like, we all still have this. It's human. We have skeletons, we have shadows, we all do. And even if we've worked on it quite a bit, they might show up in lighter ways. Definitely if they're more integrated, it's not quite the same, but I think that we can all understand that that's a human part of our experience, right? So with that said, I know that this may not apply to every single Pisces rising, Pisces sun that's out there. Remember, this is a collective reading. So if this is resonating with you, awesome. If it's not, and this is your sun sign, check out your rising or vice versa, right? If you really want to get specific, I do private one-to-one readings and I am accepting readings, and you can check that down below in the description for the links to go check that out. So what I pulled here for Pisces for this particular new moon to full moon, right? By the way, the next eclipse is happening on May 5th. That's when we will have the next eclipse. So this is our eclipse season. It's one of two that we have this year. But what we're dealing with for this particular shadow is the calling the storm. And this particular card can be, as you might guess from the photo, someone who is really powerful. Think again about how this is squaring Pluto, right? Somebody who is dealing with elements of power and exerting their power in the world to get things done, to manifest things, right? Manifesting is that waxing phase that we're in here. And, but does it in ways that are really chaotic, which we can connect back also to the eclipse. So I'm loving how this is actually coming together with this, but it's like, you know, are you going about getting things done in your world in a way that is messy, in a way that is chaotic, in a way that is really just kind of through force, right? You think about like creating through force and chaos, like that is forceful. It's forcing things to go your way, the way that you want them to go. And so there is another way to go about creating in your world. And if you're doing this in a way where it's like, you're just like, I don't know how these patterns just happen to me. It's like, well, at the core, you might not realize that it is something that is not so on the surface with your consciousness. It might be a little bit more subconscious about the way that you go about exerting your power in the world to get things done. So this is something to pay attention to, right? And again, no judgment with this. We all have either experienced doing things in our life that are related to this kind of shadow, or it's something that we deal with, right? So even if it's not a regular shadow of yours, it's just something you're going through for a time, you know, a season, not a lifetime, that's fine. But we can relate, like we can understand what this is, to what it's like to experience that. So especially I think the more years you've been on this planet, like the more that you can see where you yourself or other people around you have had that experience. And then the spiritual advice that we have coming through here for you is the 3 of coins. You know, I like that this is an earth symbol, and it's definitely about working together with others. So I can, you know, can you see the contrast here, right? Like, can you see that there is a contrast between creating from this place versus working together towards a greater goal than what is just for yourself, to work together with others to create something, either in community or with other people. This could be with friendships, it could be with projects, whatever it is. And definitely we can relate this back to, you know, the Gemini card, right? Like I said, the Gemini card can be very social, definitely Mercury with like that communication aspect, right? Like we can pull this back in, we can pull this theme back in and see how it's connected there. I definitely feel more strongly this like contrast, and like I feel like that's where to put your attention is in here. So sorry you guys, I'm getting over a cold. So also we are working with the waxing energies of this new moon to full moon. So let's like talk about that just for a quick second. Even though we have the eclipse and Mercury retrograde happening during this new moon to next full moon, right? Even though that's what is happening during this, it changes the way that we work with the energy, but it's still like the energy is still waxing, right? So we can still work with it, with building and seeding to materialize, manifest, grow, however you want to put it, like whatever we're trying to seed and grow. It just needs to be worked with a little bit differently during this phase, right? So here's one thing I really want to say. during this particular this particular new moon to full moon phase, because of what's occurring, I do not recommend, it is not recommended to work with the energies of the eclipse to do your manifestation rituals or ceremonies or setting intentions or building vision boards or whatever it is that you do when you normally work with the energy of the new moon to the full moon. This is not a regular time. At this time, it would be advised to just sit back and allow things to unfold before you, see what comes up, see what gets activated in your life, and then work with that from there, right? And Mercury coming in to be retrograde, it's not something to be afraid of. It just means that it slows us down. It has us pause before sending that email or that text, or, if you can't avoid signing a contract, then definitely before signing a contract, it has us slow down before we jump in the car to go travel or on a plane. Like, make sure that you double check, triple check, you have what you need, that everything is taken care of, that all your ducks are in a row. And so I would say it would be wise, I believe, to watch what unfolds and then wait a few days, and on maybe like the weekend would be, I think would be a good time to like, okay, maybe now we're a little bit away from that chaotic energy. And I can now work with the energy and you can see what has come up, what's been activated that might shift how you want to build and create and manifest things. Like, the new information that comes through might have you feel differently, and you might go, oh man, like I kind of wish I would have put more energy and attention into like this now and pivoted in this way. And is one way to look at it. But again, when we're talking about the light being eclipsed, right? And when that happens, it creates this, it's almost like an out of time. Like, the energy becomes very chaotic, and it can go flip-flop, sideways, twisted, and we don't know where it's going to go. That's what chaos is. Chaos is chaos, and you cannot control chaos. That's the very nature of chaos, is it cannot be controlled because it's chaos. So this is not a recommended time, and you can do some research about that if you would like, but just a heads up, that's what I want to say. So still though, we want to look at like, what are your guides saying about where to invest your time, energy, and attention into building and seeding and growing during this particular phase of new moon to full moon. And what we have showing up is the Chariot card. And I actually really love that the Chariot card is showing up. It's so much about alignment, right? The Chariot is forward movement, but it's forward movement that comes through alignment. Like, the action being taken, the movement forward comes from you aligning yourself cosmically, spiritually, whatever that means to you, through your different energy centers, through your psyche, your intuition, through your communication, through your heart, through to your solar plexus. And the will of your solar plexus, interesting because we're talking about a solar eclipse, right? But like, the will of you being completely in alignment, that power that moves through from top through, is what actually gives the command to the horses to go forward. It's what allows for everyone to be moving in the right direction in alignment. The horses don't have reins. They're not, going sideways from that. They're still going straight forward, but there's nothing that's being controlled by the rider. The rider is in such alignment that they are all one. They are all aligned, and they're all on the same page. And so things move forward with more momentum and more ease when we can be fully aligned like that. And I feel like that the Chariot is a really powerful card for this. And so I would say that this is a time that where, for this particular phase, to focus on getting yourself in alignment, getting your heart and your thoughts and your voice, your communication, right, on point and in alignment with your values, so that you can move forward. And that kind of aligned movement is not something that happens in a messy way. It is not like a just like last second kind of a thing. It's definitely in line with that Mercury energy, the Mercury retrograde energy of like, slow it down a second. Like, let's make sure that we're aligned here and on the same page here, right? And I feel like this definitely has somewhat to do with your communication for some of you out there, because we have your advice along with that being the Queen of Swords. And the Queen of Swords is definitely about like communication for sure, but about staying true to yourself, about speaking the truth. And I would say the caution here is to make sure that you're speaking your truth with as much diplomacy as possible, especially during Mercury retrograde, right? Like connecting this back again to this Gemini energy, which is ruled by Mercury. And so I feel like, you know, communication is definitely a part of what comes through in Gemini. For sure it is, right? Speaking, writing, whatever it is. And so your advice is like, you're being encouraged to own what is so for you. Another phrase like people like to say, and I still use the term just because it's the easiest that people seem to understand, is like when I say like what's so for you, what I'm saying is like what feels true to you, what feels like your personal truth. I believe that truth, ultimate truth, is unchanging. So I don't think personal truth is necessarily like the right, like maybe most accurate way to put this, but it is what most people kind of really resonate with and understand. So like what is so for you, what feels resonant for you, what feels aligned for you, and to be able to have the conversations that you need to have and to communicate in a way that is straight up, that is direct, but also diplomatic, but is still staying true to yourself. Right? And so that's the advice that I see really coming through here. And I do see a connection like coming through the cards and how this all ties together back with this. So I would say if you want more of like the full picture, definitely go check out your April reading. I will put that up on the screen so that you can check out the monthly so that you maybe can get more of the full picture. Again, if you want to know specifics for you, you can book a reading. Definitely, if you felt like this was helpful or insightful in some way, give the video a like. It helps with the channel as it's building and growing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell. That all helps. And also that way you know when the new videos come out and all of the new content that's going to be coming out later this year as well. So thanks for being here. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.